Hello, and it's time to take a look at the weapon changes that were in the winter patch. This video is a couple of days later than I expected because I forgot I'd got some hospital appointments. But let's have a look at the buffs, nerfs and fixes for weapons from the winter patch. Now there's not really any earth-shattering buffs or nerfs, but there are some changes to popular guns that you're probably going to notice. But unless it's a major change, I'm not going to stop and discuss it, I'm just going to rattle through most of these. So the auto-loading 825 has had its reload time extended from 2.9 seconds to 3.066 seconds. The number 3 revolver has had its rate of fire in aim down sights increased from 119 rounds per minute to 138 rounds per minute. The impact grenades have been nerfed, they now do 72 damage instead of 80 damage. The Tank Gewehr 1918 won't get more ammo if you drop it on the floor and pick it up again, but it will get more ammo when you're standing on an ammo bag. So instead of having to stand there for ages while it gave you 1 round at a time, it's now going to give you 4 rounds at a time. Bayonet charges are now going to properly award service stars. The Frommer stock auto magazine capacity has gone up from 14+1 to 15+1, which is what it was in real life. The damage for the Russian 1895 trench and 1895 horse drops off slower, so it's now going to have a slightly better 2-shot kill range. And that's a bit of a common theme in some of these changes. They're not going for massive 1-shot kills, but they are improving some of the weapons' 2-shot kill capacities. They fixed a few places where the text for the Automatico M1918 actually called it the Modelo 1918, which is really what its proper name was. And I have no idea why DICE are still insisting on putting things like M1918 in front of designations when that's an American military thing and the Automatico wasn't an American military thing. So anyway, let's move on from that. Improved the Selbstlader 1906's aimed accuracy, reduced its recoil and decreased its spread. So they're trying to make the 1906 a reasonable gun, and it is a very good gun apart from the fact it's only got 5 rounds. With a 3-shot kill rifle, that means you can only kill 1 person per reload unless they're already damaged. The Lewis gun optical and the M1909 optical have had their horizontal recoil increased by 10% when aiming down sights. This is a bit of a strange move for a gun that's designed to be used while aiming down sights, so basically they've made the sighted version of these guns slightly worse. Maybe they were too good, I don't know the stats, but to be honest, the best way to use them was always on a bipod anyway. Now in DICE's usual horrible wording, it says they've upped the recoil decrease of low weight self-loading rifles from 6 to 7. And basically by that convoluted English what they mean is the low weight designated rifles will now not gain as much recoil as you shoot. They have slightly buffed the Martini Henry, so when they fixed the Martini Henry and removed basically its bug, it became not a very good gun after it was a very good gun before. So what they've done is increased its damage in that sweet spot. So between 30 and 80 meters it now has a slight damage increase. And while this doesn't make any difference to headshots or upper torso shots, for lower torso, arm and leg shots it's going to be doing more damage and you're more likely to get a kill in between that 30 and 80 meter sweet spot. We have a lot of changes for shotguns. So the first is they've tweaked the damage behaviour of the 12 gauge automatic shotgun to balance all variants better against each other. Now I had assumed that this meant that what they were trying to do is make the variants of the 12 gauge automatic feel different. But looking at the stats, that's not what they've done. For the extended, they've increased the pellet cone from 1.6 degrees to 1.8 degrees, making this the easiest version to hit with, but you're not going to hit with as many pellets. And it does a 2-shot kill on a healthy target out to about 18 meters. Now bizarrely, despite what they said about making a better balance between the variants, what they've done with the backbore and the hunter is make them almost identical. So the pellet cone has been reduced from 1.28 to 1.2, and the only difference really is that the backbore can kill up to about 19 meters with 2 shots and the hunter can kill up to about 21 meters with 2 shots. I'm not sure how they're working out those ranges because they've got the same pellet cone and the same number of pellets and the same damage per pellet. So why one of them does 19 meters and one of them does 21 meters, I'm not exactly sure. The next shotgun changes are for the Model 10A Slug. They reduced its aim dispersion from 0.3 to 0.24 when stationary and from 0.5 to 0.48 when moving. So this is basically going to make it a bit more accurate. They've increased its muzzle velocity from 380 meters per second to 420 meters per second, which is going to slightly reduce the lead time for shots. Then they say they've reduced the damage against gut, arms and legs, but added the ability to kill a healthy target with shots to the gut and upper arms within 8 meters. So that I see as they've increased its damage against the gut and upper arms, but then lowered it overall, so maybe once you get past those 8 meters the damage is less. But then they also say they've increased the lethal range from chest shots from 10 to 11 meters. So I'm not quite sure how they balance all those together, but apparently gut, arm and leg shots are going to do less damage, but it's going to be easier to kill with gut and upper arm shots within 8 meters and chest shots within 11 meters. Reading through DICE's weapon patch notes isn't always easy because they don't really describe what they've done, just what the effects are going to be. So you've got a bunch of effects which don't really seem to add up, but somewhere in the weapon physics and the weapon dynamics that they've changed, they do. Probably the biggest nerf in this winter patch involves horizontal recoil and some of the guns that people like to run and shoot with. So the Automatico Trench, the Hellriegel Factory, the M1909 Storm, the Madsen Storm, the MG15 Storm and the BAR Storm. So these are all the fully automatic weapons that are designed for close range use. They've all had their horizontal recoil increased by 14.3%. Now I have tried most of these guns since this change, and for the Automatico it makes no difference whatsoever because you're very rarely aiming it and you're very rarely going for range shots. So if you're hip firing the Automatico at close range, this recoil increase doesn't really matter. Now it's the same for all of these really. If you're hip firing at close range, doesn't really make a difference. The two guns that I really feel this does affect is the Hellriegel and the BAR Storm. The Hellriegel is the mid-range assault gun, and you do often aim down sights and try and take those mid-range kills. The recoil does make a lot of difference, and it's the same with the BAR Storm. The Storm was pretty accurate when you got out to mid-ranges, and when you were aiming down sights you could take some pretty good long-range shots. The BAR Storm doesn't seem quite so much a jack of all trades anymore. It is brought back down to being the close-range BAR. Some of the medic guns have had a bit of a buff, so they've had their horizontal recoil reduced. The auto loading has had it reduced from 0.6 to 0.4. The C. Rigotti has had it reduced from 0.64 to 0.56. And the M1907 SL has had it reduced from 0.84 to 0.7. Now I can see DICE have made this buff because these are the least popular medic guns. You know, the Selbstlader is still the best medic gun because of its ammo count and because it's pretty accurate and because you can have a sight on it and because it 3-shot kills like all the others. So these changes are trying to buff up some of the less popular guns. And I can see it working for the auto loading, but the other two are still pretty middle of the road. And finally for these weapons changes we have the matching of reload animations to reload times. So one of the things that commonly happens in DICE first person shooters is that they tweak the reload times of guns to make them better or worse, but they don't have time to do the animations. So the animations and the reload times are out of sync, and sometimes you can think your gun's reloaded because the animation is finished but the actual reload time hasn't finished. So yeah, there's a constant battle to try and keep these things in sync. So the guns that have had these changed are the number 3 revolver, the MLE 1903, the Gasser, the M1911, the Luger 1906, the C. Rigotti, the Mondragon, the Selbstlader, the Badeo, the Bulldog. All of those have had their reload animations and reload times matched. They've also added a few sounds that were missing and a few hammercock animations, But basically it's taking the animations and matching them to the times that the reload actually took. So that's it for the winter patch weapon changes. Like I say, there's nothing really in there that's earth-shattering. The increased horizontal recoil for the Storm variants, the Hellriegel and the Automatico Trench are probably the biggest change in these patches. I'm not quite sure why the Automatico Trench got the nerf but the Automatico Storm didn't. In fact, in the footage in the background you can see me using the Automatico Storm after this patch because I thought it must be a misprint, that the Automatico Trench wasn't the gun nerfed and it would have been the Automatico Storm. But the Automatico Storm still seems to be the gun that it ever was. You can just run and gun and hip fire with this thing all day long and it doesn't appear to have had this nerf. Now, like I say, with the Automatico it is a bit hard to tell whether something's been nerfed because recoil isn't really something you deal with the Automatico because it's at that close range and it's usually hip fire anyway. So maybe it was the Trench, maybe it was the Storm, I can't say. But from the patch notes it says the Automatico Trench had its recoil nerfed, but the Automatico Storm didn't. Now I can understand the nerfing of the LMG Storm variants because they were really good. They're still good, they're just not as multi-role as they used to be. The Hellriegel nerf I don't really think was needed. It's probably only there to try and get people to use the MP18 more. But the Automatico, if you're gonna nerf it, you've got to nerf all the variants because the Automatico as a whole is the problem. Not the Trench variant, not the Storm variant, just the Automatico's rate of fire is what makes it so good. And if you just nerf one variant, people move to the other. So if the Trench is worse, use the Storm. The thing does no damage at range, so why are you aiming down sights with the Automatico? You just hip fire it. There are a couple of nice buffs in the patch as well. I think buffing the Martini Henry will stop the people whinging about how it went from a god gun to a useless gun when it was never supposed to be the god gun. It was basically one-shot killing on body parts it wasn't supposed to. When they fixed it, it did nerf it too much, and now we've got a bit of a balanced buff to try and make it a bit better in that sweet spot. And the C. Rigotti getting a minor buff is good as well because that's the starting gun for the medic class, and I think the starting guns should be utilitarian but still good. So the MP18 and the C. Rigotti and the Lewis gun and the SMLE should be good guns because those are the ones that people have their first experience of the game with. So buffing the start guns I think is always a good idea. And then you give them other guns with different variants and variations and roles to then move on to, but they don't feel like they're disadvantaged with the starting guns. So what do I think of the winter patch overall? Well, as patches go, it was pretty inoffensive. They made some good changes to progression and things for people to work towards. They made some nice changes to the guns, nothing drastic, just some fairly basic weapon balancing and fixes. And that's really what you can say about this patch. There's nothing really dramatic in it, it's just housework. Hopefully when the They Shall Not Pass DLC comes out we're going to see some more changes, but I do like the idea of them doing incremental changes in stages rather than trying to dramatically fix everything in one go. It would be nice if all of a sudden we had a proper achievement system and all the guns were balanced, but throwing too much into a patch usually just causes more problems. When you try and balance every gun in the game, what you end up with is a whole new balance. Not a fixed balance, just a whole new balance that nobody has really tested, and it often throws up problems. And it's the same with throwing in a whole new system for achievements and advancements. All you really end up doing is creating more problems and bugs. But what I would like to see is a lot of these issues being fixed before the second DLC. So maybe we get a patch a month, and then by the time the second DLC comes around we can then just be adding new features and new weapons to a stable game. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the winter patch. Thanks for watching.